Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for the Big Read Professional Development, Teaching the Graphic Memoir. I am Jewel Ratzlaff. I work with the Poughkeepsie Public Library District. This is our 15th year coordinating the annual Big Read project. And we are recording these sessions. We have 3 more sessions coming up. On Thursday, well, no, 2 more. After this one, we have on Thursday at 9:30, implicit bias in the classroom and techniques for discussing racial diversity or cultural diversity in the classroom. And then at 11 o'clock, the Artifact is leading us in a professional development on portraiture and memoir writing. I will put my contact information in the chat as well. So if you need more information about anything regarding the Big Read or these professional developments, you can just send me an email and I'm happy to share that with you. If you could make sure that the name that appears on the screen matches who you are. So if we want to have a discussion and call you out, we know what your name is. And if you would also just keep your mics muted during the presentation, that would be great. We will have time, I believe, for question and answer after our presenters, and maybe they'll ask for some input in the middle. We'll see how that goes. But let me go right on and introduce our 2 presenters today. Tim Reifenberg is a teacher at Royce Ketchum High School. He also, I believe, has a PhD in the graphic novel. Is that? No, got that wrong. Sorry, Tim. You got to unmute. You've got to unmute, Tim. Sorry.
I did my master's thesis in using comics in the classroom.
Oh, there we go.
PhD. Haven't gotten that.
Not a PhD. All right. All right. Sorry about that. And Bradley Duguid, who is staff member at the Poughkeepsie Public Library District, as well as the Hudson Valley Writers Group. And they will be doing our presentation today. So I'm going to turn it over to Bradley and Tim now. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jewel, and thank you everybody for being here. It's nice to see your floating heads here on Zoom today. I'm going to kick off the session, and Tim is going to carry us through the majority of the presentation today, but I thought we'd start with a little bit of writing. It's very core to what we do at the Hudson Valley Writing Project. If you're familiar, we're based on campus at SUNY New Paltz and work with teachers and schools and students all throughout our region all year long. A lot of our sessions, we start with writing into the day or writing into the morning. And this is a time when I thought we would just take about 3 minutes, just a couple minutes, to very quickly check in through our writing. So you're invited to answer both or either of these questions. What is your history or your relationship to comics at this point in your life? And it's very valid and actually useful to us if you say, I have never picked up one in my life. I think this and this and this about comics. Or you may say, hey, I used to enjoy them as a kid, maybe not so much now. Or maybe you're an avid reader like Tim and I both are in different genres. We love to hear what those are, just as a baseline for where you're coming from. And also we'd love to know, are you planning on using a graphic novel or a graphic memoir, or even specifically this title that we'll be, for the most part, focusing on today, which is Thi Bui's The Best We Could Do, in your classroom coming up, or maybe you've done it in the past or are thinking about doing it sometime in the near but undefined future. So let's take 3 minutes to write it out, and you're invited to put your writing or even a selection or the gist of your writing right into the chat window so we can see and name this out loud. Any questions before we begin? All right, awesome. Let's take 3 minutes to write. We'll check in just a few minutes. Time goes fast. We're going to wrap up our writing in just about 30 seconds. So you can think about how you wrap up or what else you'd like to share in the chat window here. Okay, as I say, now's the time to put that last period, exclamation point, question mark at the end of what you're writing. You're very welcome to share it with us as you like. And if we had more time, I would love to read each of these aloud or invite you to speak to what you wrote. But in the interest of time, just at a glance, it looks like we've got a real spread here. Some people who have read comics as a kid, some who were not super into comics as a kid. I'm noticing some of you, maybe like me, have associated superheroes with comics, especially comics for young readers and teen readers, which is not unusual, and then later in life got acquainted with quote unquote adult comics. What we'll typically talk about is graphic novels, things like Maus, some other great titles listed here. I'd love to share the chat with one another after this is over as well, so you get a chance to read over your writing. But thank you so much for sharing this baseline with us and hopefully warming up and focusing our brains for what's to come ahead. So we'll do a little bit of writing out of the session, which will be our chance to process what we've learned today. But now, without further ado, I'm going to go to the next slide and pass it over to my colleague, Tim. So Tim, the floor is yours.
All right, you're gonna regret that. Okay, since we have a mix of people and some of you, you're all familiar with the format. Most of you have at least read comic strips or are familiar with comics in general and have a general idea about them. You're basically talking about sequential art. It's a blending of the writing and art, and when they work really well together, you basically have a melding where one feeds off the other. And in the really good graphic novels, of which the best we could do is one of them, you get a really good sense of you know, how the art adds to the prose, how the prose adds to the art. For teaching with a graphic novel, you've got a couple different approaches to it. Why you use it or whatever. It's no different than if you're an English teacher using a book, or if I'm a history teacher using historical document and stuff. You need to have a purpose for why you're using it. And the good thing about using graphic novels or even comics or comic strips, your kids are already familiar with them. They're steeped in the culture. The Marvel movies, the DC movies, they're already familiar with certain characters. A lot of the stuff that kids have read in the middle schools or are reading now in the middle schools, like Bone, the Raina Telgemeier graphic novels, the Big Nate books, and all of those are a really big cornerstone of publishing, then make up a very big portion of how lucrative it is for publishers and stuff. And the great thing is there's a ton of different genres and approaches to it. For why we use it in the classroom, they're already familiar with it. You're using something that a lot of them already love. A lot of teens are, particularly preteens and teens, are reading manga, which is Japanese comics. Little bit different in tone and subject matter, but they enjoy it. Developing, augmenting visual literacy skills for students, getting them to basically think and see, utilize those processes at the same time. Autobiographical graphic novels are personal to them. They'll probably relate to them even more. The best we could do definitely has a lot of memory ideas and relationship ideas that the kids will connect with. But there's other autobiographical graphic novels. Maus, Persepolis, and a bunch of others that really give you a sense of what the characters and stuff are going through, and relatable to the students as they read them. You get historical aspects that are covered in the graphic novels, and you get different time periods, you get personal histories, you get their biography, autobiographies, and you get a really good sense of time and place. You get tons of different genres represented. We're going to focus mostly on autobiographical, but there's suspense, there's comedic, there's slice of life, there's a ton of different ones that you can utilize. We use historical and literacy themes all throughout our teachings, depending on whatever discipline you're teaching, and you can apply those same things with a graphic novel and cover them the same way. If you're teaching a graphic novel for English, you can still cover plot, theme, and those elements, as well as others, in terms of pacing and things like that, that you would in a novel. You can do the same thing in a graphic novel. Students are becoming very analytical in terms of utilizing graphic novels and stuff. They're developing different skills when they read them. So for some students, they might not take to a graphic novel, or they're not as familiar with it. They didn't grow up with it, or they're not as versed in it, but we'll kind of walk you through how you can, at least show them the rudimentary ways of getting into it and how to work with a graphic novel in class. And they develop an understanding of the creative process of storytelling. All right, these are reasons why a graphic novel works, and gets them to think, why did the artist or the creator use this particular choice? Why did they use this particular dialogue? Why did they use these ideas with this particular sequence? And those are the type of things that you can get them start thinking about when they start thinking about their own writing in terms of things. How was your prose visualize that, and that type of thing. All right, and that's good for this slide. Anybody have any questions about any of this or anything you want me to go over? If I'm talking too fast, please just give me a heads up. I have a tendency to just keep going, so please let me know. All right, Bailey, we're good? Okay, we're just gonna quick hit you with basic terminology. You've heard some of this stuff before. A trade paperback and a graphic novel, I'm going to use them kind of, and in some ways I'm also going to throw comics in. I'll use them interchangeably, but they are different entity. Comics are periodicals. They were used to be 64 pages. Now they're, an average comic book is 32 pages, about 21 to 22 pages of art and story, and the rest of it is advertisement and company stuff and a letters page and things like that. Most trade paperbacks are basically compilations of a graphic novel. Next sequence. And so basically what you're getting is with a trade paperback is a reprint of stuff that has already been published in single form. All right. They can be in large chunks. They are usually put some behind the scenes material. Sometimes there's a forward or an afterword by a creator. And they usually, they're very lucrative to publishers, because once they've already paid for the rights for the material, sometimes they just have to pay a reprint fee, and that's basically it. Or the artist and writer will get a kickback from how many graphic novels and stuff are sold. Depends on the contract, but that's a trade paperback. All right. Most of us think in terms of trade paperback and graphic novel as basically being the same. As I said, you can use older material, keeps the stuff in print, it keeps it lucrative, and bookstores and libraries are the primary market, though comic stores were kind of handling them first. It became more bookstores and libraries. The stigma of comics and graphic novels changed a little bit in the late 80s, early 90s. And also publishers realized that they started publishing things in chunks and stuff, people started buying them. And so they kept things in print. They're also, for publishers, there's a higher price point. They make more money from it. They've already kind of used up the money on the other end. For a graphic novel, they're paying a lot of things up front to the artist and writer, and then there's more residuals and stuff later. Again, I'm probably getting in the weeds with some of this, but that's kind of where we are. So a graphic novel is original, all right? It was basically created by either a series of creators, or usually in terms of the autobiographical stuff, a creator who is both the writer and the artist and telling their story. Sometimes they'll work with somebody else. There's usually an editor on the publishing arm that guides them, deals with the nuts and bolts stuff in terms of the advertising and all that, and also helps them shape the story as they go to make it marketable, to hit the beats and stuff that they want, and to kind of help them edit things down in terms of, you don't need this, you've kind of already covered that, that kind of thing. The same way you do with a student's writing. These are original stories, and they are, as I said, basically creator owned. All right, Maus is an example, Persepolis is an example, Smile by Raina Telwiger is an example. And those are single voice creators. All right, the similarities between a graphic novel and trade paperback, they basically cover a bunch of different genres. They're in the comic book format, the sequential art format that we utilize, and they vary in quality. Some of them are the art's really expansive. It's very detailed. Sometimes it's kind of like almost very comic strip oriented, and I'm not trying to judge it down, but sometimes it's almost very rudimentary in terms of the art. Doesn't mean it doesn't have any skill to it, just the art styles are all over the place. All right, trade paperbacks are previous material, and graphic novels are original. And as terms of reading and stuff, we kind of use the term interchangeably. If you see a kid in class and he's reading, you say what graphic novel you're reading, he could be reading an Avengers compilation of like 15 issues, or he could be reading Maus or Persepolis or something like that. It just depends. If he's reading manga, some manga has been reprinted from Japanese, reformatted to the American market, and usually with American translations, and is published, and that fits in the graphic novel or trade paperback area. All right, we're good. All right, and so these are examples of graphic novels. All right, on the left-hand side of your screen is your originals, and on the other is your trade paperbacks. All right, and you read them the same, and you'd be usually put on the shelf the same. Usually if you go to Barnes and Noble and you look in the bookstore and they're racked, they're usually racked together. Occasionally you'll see different stands or stanchions, areas where they're put, if they're highlighting one over the other. But most of the time, you'll see graphic novels in with trade paperbacks. There's not much delineation. All right, as far as sales go, this is the most current I've seen. 2021, so far, sales have ticked up slightly and I'm just using anecdotal knowledge from a couple publishing or creators that their sites and stuff I go to. But in terms of 2020, even with the COVID pause in publishing and stuff, people started reading digitally a little bit more, and we're still buying. Amazon was obviously doing gangbusters besides Clorox and everything else, and so as you can see, it's a lucrative business for publishers. That's why Random House has their own arm to it, why Scholastic is the leader of them and has been constantly reintroducing new creators and new characters and stuff to that market, because it's a rich market. And as you can see, the tween market, the middle grades into the 9th, 10th grade age bracket, that's kind of where the bread and butter of publishing is right now. All right, and Scholastic had 20 top sellers in book sales for 2000. That's big. All right, and as you can see, the only one that's a little bit different here is comic stores, because comic stores are obviously most of them are more periodically oriented, though they do sell graphic novels. The price point is usually cheaper on a place like Amazon or digitally, so they do sell them. But and digital has kicked up, and keeps kind of moving things along. If you looked at from 2017 to 2020, incrementally they've increased digitally, but it still hasn't out eclipsed regular book sales and stuff. All right. And again, this is basically just North America. There's certain graphic novels that are popular overseas from American markets, and there's foreign graphic novels that come to America that become popular as well. But again, the numbers are immense. And again, it's just to give you a sense of how popular they are and why your kids are reading them. All right, reading comics. If you're reading American comics, particularly US comics, we're looking at, and Canadian comics, we're looking at a left to right, average, follow the thought balloons, look at the art and approach. If you're looking at manga, you would go right to left. And that's basically how we're doing it. You just follow the balloons. You guys are kind of familiar with that. If you read a comic strip or a comic, so you're good to go. All right, we're good. This is a page from Bone. Bone was an independent comic by Jeff Smith. Scholastic picked up the rights. They colorized it. It came out in black and white, and it became a huge seller for them. They took the first graphic novel, put it in a color. They shortened the format slightly in terms of size, and came out as a traditional comic. And it took off like gangbusters. And it's one of those preteen tween graphic novels that just took off before Scholastic. All right. Again, if you're going by the your format, you're just reading right to left. All right. And it's one of my favorite lines from a comic book. All right, the last line with the dragon. That's right, kid. Never play an ace when a two will do. I just thought that philosophically that was a great line in terms of things. All right. Similar to Arthur, if you saw the movie, the original, I don't want his last meal to be Jello. Those lines always resonate with me. Okay, we're good. So if you're looking at it for the next slide, this is the way you would read it. Now, you have students that are very visually oriented. They may look at the art first, then read the blurbs. You may look at the blurbs and then read the art. And by blurbs, we mean the captions and the thought balloons or the speaker balloons. The idea either way works, and it just either approach depends on how the student processes things for themselves in terms of visual. All right, there's no right and wrong way here. As long as they're getting the gist of the story, they're understanding it, and you know, either way will work for them. All right. Okay, these are a lot of terms. There's a presentation that's with this. If we don't have time, Bradley has put the link in at the end with a bunch of other information and stuff and sources that we have for you that he's put together that will kind of give you a sense of things. I'll go over some of these terms in terms of looking at one of the pages from the best we could do. But you know, they're just terms that are utilized, and you'll see different approaches and stuff. You won't see dialogue balloons with the best we could do, but in other graphic novels and stuff, they show somebody speaking, you'll see it. You see a lot of captions and just the storytellers, the characters' thoughts as they're reading. All right. And we will come back to those terms in a second. Graphic novels are made basically prior to about 1990, late 80s. They were basically laid out on Bristol board. You know, they would take a comic page, lay out the artist would kind of flesh out a thumbnail idea of how they wanted the page to look. If somebody who's creating, doing the writing and the art at the same time, they're usually doing their own lettering and stuff. And so they kind of lay out how they want the page to look. In a regular comic or trade paperback, that has been done usually by a process. Usually there's a writer, there's an artist, they lay it out. The artist will go through and you know, lay things out, and the writer will go back in and put the dialogue and stuff in based off of the art. That was called the Marvel method. Sometimes there's a full script, sometimes there's just a breakdown and plot. It just depends on the creator. But in these terms, collaborative or single creator. Most of the autobiographical stuff that we'll be looking at and talking about will be single creator. So they basically, they're jack of all trades and done a little bit of everything. They may have a letterer do it, and it's usually done on a sheet called Bristol board. It's a hard copy piece of paper. It's usually a little bit larger in size than what it's going to be printed in, and then they shrink it down and allows them to put the thought balloons and stuff in, and put the art in, and then they'll do a coloring. When they color it and stuff, they'll do it on a separate process. Now, thanks to computers and stuff, a lot of things is set up digitally, and it's done on a light box, the art, and then they kind of shrink things down. They do everything and do it all at once. All right. Again, single vision, they get to kind of decide and they go their own way. It was collaborative. They basically work with a group of people, and each has their own approach and their own duty to work in concert with the artist and the letterer and the colorist to create what they do. I'm leaving out a couple steps here just for time, but one thing you can't discount is an editor. The editor will be the one that will guide them through the process, whichever one we're utilizing. They will definitely kind of give you a sense of how things go in terms of pacing and in terms of page count and things like that, and highlight story elements and stuff, and sometimes ask for redraws and or edit things out and alter things. It's a process, so I don't mean to take them out of the loop, and then you also have to think in terms of publishing and stuff as well. All right, we're good. Why teach the best we could do? That's the one that we're going to focus on, but it doesn't really matter in terms of a graphic novel. Use the same approach. In this case, we're using something that they know. We're using their literary skills, kind of a similar thing that we talked about before. In terms of the best we could do, you're looking at a personal point of view, a personal memory, personal history, which kids will be able to relate to. You're looking at a family history, which kids will be able to relate to. You're looking at things from the geographical and historical context, in this case, Vietnam and the Vietnam War. And they do a really good job in the graphic novel of giving you background on the Vietnam War. And they have an infographic, which we'll talk about briefly, that gives you a sense of what was going on during the time that basically it's a history of Vietnam. You get the cultural heritage, you get the familial bonds, you get the family drama, and you get it's things that the kids will really relate to. You can cover, again, the literary themes. You have art and story working together, and you get a different approach to storytelling. And so you can discuss storytelling techniques and go over that. So if a kid is doing a student is doing a prose, you have a prose assignment for them as an English teacher, you can get them to think in terms of how can you be concise? If you were having somebody draw this, how would you visually make this compelling in your reading? If you're just doing the prose and drawing and doing that, how do you make it descriptive so that people can relate to what you're seeing? All right, that kind of thing. In terms of for me as a history teacher, the Vietnam aspect was really played up and important. All right. Any questions about any of that? When we think of a visually enhanced classroom, I found this graphic, and Bradley and I thought it was a good way of kind of, when you think in terms of the graphics of how a student, how we want them to think in a classroom visually, these are some of the things. You can utilize images and media to teach concepts, graphic organizing. You get them to think in terms of visual imagery, get them to think in terms of, usually when you're reading a comic, reading a prose novel, you're thinking visually anyway, because you're interpreting what you're reading. Sketch notes or infographics are good ways of getting kids to write out information, and they don't have to be artistically inclined. They can be you can just use stick figures and stuff and still, or just rudimentary sketch things out and have a basic idea. And we're also looking at visual literacy. You guys have done enough Zoom meetings and Google Meets with your kids where they're looking at a bunch of different screens. You have a presentation up, they're looking at their friends in the background, and they have to process a lot of things at once. And this just helps them with that process. All right, something that we want them to do in the classroom. All right. I teach a film course, and so and one of the things that your kids will probably, or you'll think about, or your kids will think about, that might come up with discussion is it's sort of like a static movie. Well, if you watch a movie, you have certain things you want them to look at. What's the filmmaker saying? How do you feel when you were watching it? How's the music and all the visuals and stuff and the acting work together to get you to feel a certain way or think a certain way? Well, when we're looking at a graphic novel, you kind of want to do the same thing, but just approach it from a more visual point of view. What are you feeling when you see this? What ideas are you thinking about as you're viewing this? What thoughts did you have about the characters as you were reading this? And did it make you laugh? Did it make you cry? Did it make you feel sad? Did it make you angry? Those are all the elements that we think in terms of a film. We get viscerally thrilled, and we get anxious and stuff. And it's the same thing you can do here with a graphic novel. So it's just something to think about in terms of that. So that's why I tossed it in. And also, I will be using The Best We Could Do with my film class. And one of the things I'll be doing with them is we'll be watching a Vietnam movie, Good Morning Vietnam, and juxtapose those experiences, because that's also based on a real story and a real person. So we'll look at the Americanized view of Vietnam and stuff from that point of view as well. All right. All right. The things that we'll talk about briefly, and we'll go through, we'll look at chapter breakdowns. We'll use a see, think, wonder approach, and we'll apply it to the graphic novels, usually used with art. What do you see? What do you think? What do you feel? And we're going to apply that same element. We did add one more element to this, and it's how did you feel? Because there's a lot, particularly with The Best We Could Do and autobiographical memoirs, you definitely have reactions. So we want to see what the person reading it came up with, what your students are feeling, and that's an approach. We also created a guided reading with guided questions. So if you want to use that approach, you can do it, and you will get those links, and you'll be able to alter those and change those and do what you need to with them. We'll discuss the historical period of Vietnam War, discuss the role of memory with family history, all right, familial bonds and relationships, art and color, all right, how's that evoke emotion, punctuate emotion, particularly with this book, The Best We Could Do, the art really does, the coloring with the art really does get you to evoke a certain mood and feeling as you're reading. And the other thing that you can talk about with this, and we'll discuss a little bit, is creative choice. Why they do this, why they do that. Something that your students might have questions about. Why did they choose to do this way? Or something you might want them to think about. All right. All right, just take a moment, best you can. The font on this is a little is written like a diary entry. So the best you can, just try to read and get a sense of what this page is conveying. 2 pages are conveying. Again, if you're unfamiliar, right to left, follow the panels. Absolutely. We'll give you another moment with this page, and then we're going to see the same page a couple of times, and we'll look at it from the from the creative choices and the other aspects. Does anybody need another second with it? Okay, well, so you can see, as you can see it again. All right, as I said, a couple things to remember. It's the creator is making choices, no different than a writer choosing the proper words, the prose, the description, and the ideas that they want. And so their choices and the panels and the close-ups and the long shots and the reaction shots and stuff that they do, or the transition from one scene to another. The backgrounds, the setting that's showing you a particular panel with a page establishing that you're at a doorstop or a front door or a street. These are all choices that the creator makes to kind of give you a sense of pacing and place and things like that. And you are following the story, whether you again read the prose or look at the pictures first and go back to the prose, whichever way you choose. It's the approach is up to you, but that's basically what you're doing. One of the things I always tell students is when they're thinking about a film in my film class is you're being manipulated. Same thing here. Yes, absolutely. And you'll see a lot of that in this graphic novel. Particularly, you'll see the use of space and the way the characters are related to the space and way one character shows up in a foreground or a background. All right, let's go to the next one. So these are the Prezi presentation. This is basically what you're, these are the graphic language of a page, all right? And so the things that you need to look at, which is a couple of you already pointed out, the panels are basically the squares, all right? The white space in between, and you'll notice in some graphic novels and in some panels, you'll see art like a leg bleed over into the next panel and things like that. You'll see the gutter sometimes be used to showcase something or to delineate a break. So the panel layout and presentation and the gutters are kind of working together. Your facial expressions, the use of body language, the showing the person from the back, the pensive look of the young lady in the second page there, the various use of the shading and the color. We'll notice, particularly in a sequence in the third chapter, when you learn more about how each of the kids were born, the use of black there is really important and telling in the way that the graphic novel and the events are laid out. It does a lot in terms of gets you to feel and think a certain way, and you start to notice that as you're making your way through with the various births. The panels, facial expressions, gutter, body language. The last panel, you have your background, midground, and your foreground. And a lot of times you'll see things happening. If you take time to look at the page, you'll see there's a reason why the characters were put into the foreground, why things were put in the background. Sometimes there's things going on in the background that you might catch. And the perspective of the page is also highlighted. All right, so these are just terms. If we go back to that infographic and you click on that presentation, you'll see a lot of these elements and they'll explain it and they'll show it to you in a little bit more detail. So if you're not familiar with a page, that particular presentation will be very good about giving you a kind of school you in some of these ideas if you're not familiar with them. But when you think in terms of like, if this was just a one page and we called it a painting and we just looked at one panel, you would be looking at the same thing. You would be look at the way that the body is positioned, look at the way the tree is in the foreground and things like that. You would take things apart like that. All right. Any questions about any of that? All right, this is a chance for you to, you can put your thoughts in the chat. Just read this, look at this really quickly, and just what does it evoke? This is later on in the graphic novel. This is in, I think, chapter 9, and this is after Thi has come to America, and you get a sense of the assimilation that they're going through. Good, nice notices there. My favorite is the panel on the second page with the smoke and how it curls around and shows the moms in the same room, even though it's from a different angle. Anybody confused by the page or anything that doesn't seem made clear? Yeah, throughout the graphic novel, you'll notice that the family is always fractured to some degree. Different characters interact with each other differently. Yes. And this is the type of thing you want your students to be thinking about in terms of when they're looking at the pages, you know, and those are the type of things that you'll go over with them in terms of that. Any other questions about this or any other comments before we move on? If we had time to do like a whole chapter and that chapter was available and stuff, we could really dive into it.
Can I say, for the sake of the video, because they're not going to be able to see the chat in the video, but they will hear us, just
Okay.
some things that I'm plucking out of the chat. There's a lot of great things we're noticing, things like very specifically the mother's head poking out of the panel on the left that draws attention there, anything that breaks into the gutter there. I and Jenna also noticed that there doesn't seem to be any one picture of the family fully together, or that it seems really rare that they're all together or more than one person in the same panel. This empty family room seems important to some viewers here, that the kids' faces are relatively content here and the parents appear stressed and unhappy. Yeah. And we're noticing these as thematic elements, and in the middle bleed on the right, this character looks anxious. And I see that seems to be kind of in the gutter as well, like they made a panel out of this big space between these other thoughts. Any other thoughts before we move on?
All right, there's a bunch of different lessons and different approaches, and you'll have your own way of doing that. We have added to the or will add, if it's not there already, to the list of links and stuff. There will be a guided reading set of questions that you can do. Again, you can alter and change those any way you want. There's a bunch of different videos, and if you look online, there's a ton of Thi Bui speaking. She's done a lot of interviews and questions, but you'll be able to see her with the big read, which you'll be able to talk more about. So you know, I don't know how much you want to show the kids of her ideas and stuff beforehand, but if you want some background on her life story and things for your own edification, you know, some of the links that Bradley put up will definitely help you. There's a lot of great online sources. There's a lot of teachers that you know, have used strategies for using graphic novels and stuff. So if you go to web pages, I did notice on Teacher Pay Teachers, there's various books that teachers have done and used in their classroom and stuff. So there's materials already made. But whatever approach you use to a graphic novel, your ownership of it will be better imparted to the kids the more you do on your own. I learned a lot about the process of using a graphic novel, because I'm going to use it with my kids, by doing the same things that we've been talking about and doing. The See, Think, Wonder sheet that that Bradley has linked to and that we will give you. If you're not familiar with the graphic novel or you haven't really read it in depth, using that as you're reading it and going through will help crystallize ideas and stuff for you as you went along. And we have some examples of that if we have time. All right, you know, but we'll see where we are.
I think we are closing in on the end, and I can actually speak for just a minute about that See, Think, Wonder routine, Tim. I wonder if some of you are already familiar with this thinking routine, or just a framework for thinking, or maybe you've encountered something like it before. I first encountered it when I was in graduate school, actually, and did a little bit of work with Project Zero, which developed it. And at its core, it's really quite simple. It really is just those 3 questions. It is, what do you see? That is, what do you notice that's right here in front of you? And to go step by step to really concentrate on focusing on what's in front of you, right? So often we leap ahead to saying, well, this is all about X, or this is all about Y, to our interpretation, but rather to really sit with an image, often for a few minutes. My personal guide stone, my personal guide star while I work in the classroom is maybe just 1 minute extra than I think it should end. 1 minute past when I think it should end. Just give people time to break through and say, oh, here's this thing in the background or the midground, like Tim was saying, that I didn't notice before, and really name it. And then we work from there for our interpretations. That's the think step. What do you think about that? What does that remind you of? What do you think that could be? And that way it's rooted in some evidence or something that is there in front of them. Tim mentioned, and Tim, maybe you want to speak a little bit about this. We also add a step, could be here or it could be at the end, that is feel. And Tim, you, I think, spoke about this already in your presentation, but that with a narrative, even a biographical or a non-fictional narrative, it really is designed to, as Tim put it, sometimes manipulate or at least guide the way we feel about the story, right? Beat by beat by beat. That's the craft of the storyteller. So it seems natural to give some attention to how does that make you feel based on what you see and what you think is here in front of you. How does that make you feel? And maybe why do you think the creator wanted to make you feel this way? How does it serve the story? How does it move the story forward? And the last step is articulated here is wonder. Is what are your questions about? What else do you need to know to have a more complete picture about what's in front of you? And I've used this routine certainly in classes focusing on narrative, or I teach children's literature, and I teach other literature classes and writing classes. I've used this routine on political cartoons. I've used this routine on paintings, and even on looking at student work. And it seems really fruitful, even with very young grades, which is part of why you'll see if you click through the link later and see essentially what I just mentioned to you, that the framework is boiled down to something very essential, quite simple, so that it could conceivably be used and has successfully been used with elementary school grades all the way up through where I teach at the college level quite successfully. And it's something that I find is really useful to come back to again and again and again, and seems really natural for looking at panels from graphic novels and graphic memoirs, as Tim was discussing. I'll move on to the next slide here. We have a reading list for you, which is by no means complete. These are just some samples of recent and some classic works of graphic memoir. Some of you may have read some of these from the list already. Some of you may have heard of them already. Some of you may already be using them in your classrooms. I noticed from our earlier writing that many of you have read or are using Maus in the classroom. Some of these are very, very recent. Some of these, like Big Black Stand at Attica, was a very recent Eisner Award winner, which is kind of the pinnacle or the Oscar award, so to speak, in the comics world. And we're seeing a real diversity really taking hold in who is creating these works and what these stories are about, which seems really important for all our students, right? That we offer a range of experiences and perspectives in terms of race, class, ability, or disability. And I'm noticing some, like Jenna mentioned, kids who like sports really like dragon hoops. And I'm someone who does not like sports or really understand sports. And I also really enjoyed dragon hoops. It's a great story by Jean Lun Yang, who's a pretty well known from some of his earlier work, comic writer and artist in both genre and superhero genre and personal non-fictional storytelling as well. Do you want to add anything about any of these titles that seem particularly important or of interest, Tim, from this list? Or something that's not on the list?
From this list, Lucy Nisley has a Hudson Valley connection. In Relish, it's about her relationship with food and you know, how as she was growing up, how she became interested in cooking and the relationship she had with her mom and stuff over cooking and her within her growing up. And it takes a lot of it takes place in the Hudson Valley. Her mom was from Rhinebeck, or at one point was in Rhinebeck, and they had a co-op farm and stuff. So there's that Hudson Valley connection there. Maus is great. If the kids are into science fiction and they're familiar with Star Trek, they would know who George Takei is. And you know, also for dealing with the internment camps and stuff in America with the Japanese, you get a pretty good sense in terms of what he went through and stuff. These are all, any of them would work. Smile relates to a student's sense of self in terms of, you know, what happens when she has to deal with dental work and issues with that and what that might mean to her self-esteem and stuff. Any of these I'm familiar with a good portion of them. The last one, the most recent one that Bradley talked about, Big Black Stand at Attica, I'll have to look into that one. I'm not familiar with at all. And Dragon Hoops, I did enjoy, even though as Bradley said, we're not sports oriented. And if you guys have your own suggestions or things like that, you know, I will put my email and stuff in the link. I'm always interested in reading new things or finding new things. And if you're interested in, you know, have any questions about graphic novels and stuff that you think I can answer, I got no problem. You know, reach out to me and I'll discuss anything you want.
And our librarians are great resources too. Naturally, we actually have a monthly graphic novel book club, which does encompass both fictional and non-fictional works. That later this fall is going to read Big Black Stand at Attica. That's how I first heard of it, was through our book club and talking to Krista, who's kind of our expert on staff in graphic novels and comics literature as well. Sorry, say again.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this Thursday we're meeting, and the book is The Bridge, which is about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a really, really interesting book.
Nice. Oh, great. We have someone here who's part of the book club. Awesome. Yeah. I've sat in just once because I don't get to read every title, but they're really welcoming. It's a great group to join to learn more about graphic novels too, and what seems like a really warm, thoughtful group of people, if you're any indication, Jenna, for sure. We're right at the end of our time. There is a write out for anyone who would like to stick around, but more than anything, it's an invitation to let us know if you have any questions, if there's anything you're left wondering, anything we could expand upon that maybe isn't in this slideshow today, which we'll make sure gets in your hands along with the recording, and also an invitation to let us know, how has your relationship changed over perhaps the course of this workshop, looking more closely at some works, if it has changed your mind about anything, if it has maybe made you wonder about trying something differently, or maybe bolstered your confidence to try something that you've been doing, or any other impact on your practice is something we love to know. But in lieu of time for us today, I'm going to put my email in the chat here as well. Why not? And you're very welcome to send any responses to this question to me, which I'll share with my colleagues. Jewel Ratzliff's email is in here as well. And there's more information about the big read on our website, which is pouklib.org.
And I'll just jump in here to say that we are constantly adding resources to the Big Read web page on pouklib.org, on the library district's website. So we've got interviews and lesson plans and all kinds of different things that we are working to constantly get onto the website to make it available to everyone. So continue to check that and stay in touch. Books will be getting to you soon if you don't have them yet. But I want to thank Bradley and Tim for the presentation, and just give you a few quiet minutes if you'd like to write. Thanks so much, guys.
think we need to get a group together to talk about chapter 1 of this book. I think we're closing out our time here, so you're invited. Any other thoughts you have to share in the chat are very welcome and certainly really informative for us. Your kind words are super appreciated as well. And if you have any feedback for us about what else we can do to help you in your classroom, I'll say for my part, at least, I really welcome that feedback, and it helps us become better presenters and help make the Big Read even better year by year as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will say that for those of you who want professional development credit, I will be verifying attendance with the school districts so that I should be able to facilitate your getting credit for the PD time. Thanks again to Tim and Bradley. It's been great, very informative, and thank you all for joining us. Take care.
Bye.
You guys. That was a